Hello and welcome to another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I'm your host, Erin Jane, and today we are joined by Dave, which I'm very excited about because Dave is our first correctional officer. So Dave has worked in law enforcement as a correctional officer for the last 17 years. He has experience in the housing units, inmate transportation, within the court system, crisis negotiation, and with his department, CISM and court programs. So thank you, Dave, for jumping on and joining us today.
Thank you very much, Erin, for having me. I appreciate it.
Really appreciate you coming and sharing your time with us today. Let's just sort of get the ball rolling and what made you interested in joining law enforcement and more specifically like the correction system?
Yeah. I mean, normally when you look at it, like you go into law enforcement, there's all the different branches, whether it's police or even public safety in general. No one says they want to wake up and be a corrections officer per se, and jump into this line of work. But I mean, looking at it, I was going to school for criminal justice at the time.
Okay.
And in the process of doing that, an opportunity presented itself to work part-time at one of the facilities for the summer help, kind of like a summer program, like a summer job. And I figured, well, it's kind of better than, doing the slave wages of the day, just kind of jumping into it. And I was thinking, try something else and get my feet wet. In that process of doing it, I learned obviously a lot about the job, and I was taught a lot from experienced officers that, it's a great job. It's a great benefits and a lot of advancement opportunities. You can kind of jump into different things over time. And then towards the end of the summer, going back into school, I ended up staying and worked right along for about a year and a half. And then the position came up to take it for full time. I took the test and went through the process and went to the academy and graduated the academy. And everyone says like, oh, it's a stepping stone, but I mean, here I am almost 18 years later, and honestly, I enjoy it. It's a good job.
Wow, that's so cool. So what were your, like, obviously you're doing a criminal justice either degree or diploma or something like that. What was your sort of like original plan, or did you have one? Or
I did. I obviously, it was always kind of like after high school, you go to college, or you go to the military, and I said, oh, I wanted to become a police officer, just in general. I took the civil service exams that we have here in the States here, and I had tried to go through the process, and the school wasn't good enough. It was just high, but just high enough that you were tied with like hundreds of people on the list, before you could even go through the interview process. And just in general, I figured, well, having a degree would help as well, and learning. I had my EMT background, going through school for that in the same time. I figured anything to kind of help the resume and build better myself. And then, like I said, the position came along, the opportunity to try this, and I was like, well, what are these? What is this? Line of work? And then kind of jumping into it, realizing like, wow, all right, like it's pretty good. It's fulfilling, and it's something that can make a difference every day coming in. So, and then I ended up just jumping involved in that. But then when I was here, I was like, well, I want it, I enjoy it. I already kind of have a foot in the door, and obviously I know a lot of the people here. Why now go take the test for civil service and jump on that where I can kind of already have 3 or 4 years in. And like I said, now here I am now. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so talk to me about what is the like academy experience like for becoming a correctional officer?
So with us, it was, we obviously go with we have the bare things of, it's the counting aspect as well as the first responder part of it. In addition to, firearm safety and defensive tactics. Now it's, when we did ours back in 2008, we had about 26 weeks where we learned everything from, computer training as well as, learning a different language. We had defensive driving. We went to the fire academy for a couple of days. As well as, the defensive tactics, the firearms, the first responder, criminal law. It was just a wide range. It was 26 weeks, and here we are, like, wondering if it's ever going to end. It was just another week added on and another week. And before you knew it, like, we were 6 months into this academy. We're like, wow. But I mean, you came out with a lot of skills and resources and training that you knew that would better help you, obviously, doing your job day to day.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think I remember when I went through the police academy, it was like 20 weeks and that felt long enough. So
oh yeah. I mean, the PT alone from 6 a.m. to like 7:30, you're drained already. And then you got to go sit in the classroom for a couple hours. And then, oh, by the way, we're going on another run at like 2:00 when you're ready to leave. And he's like, what are you talking about? It's like, but it's a lot for sure.
Yeah. And are you like, is it you know, did you end up getting position with people from your academy class, or does everyone kind of get dispersed out all over the state?
So with us, there were at the time, I want to say 52 that had graduated, or 54 that had graduated with us.
Mm-hmm.
We all at the time we had two institutions where we could kind of go, and obviously based upon the three different shifts, whether it was 8 to 4 at the time, 4 to 12, or 12 to 8
Yeah.
overnights. We all kind of just divvied up between then, and then based on where you were seniority wise with your they did like a ping pong number. You would end up being where your seniority number would be. So if an opportunity presented itself to go on a different shift, we have our annual shift cycle every year that we're able to bid
Okay.
shifts and obviously and days off. So and it kind of helped from there.
Okay.
So
Okay. And so you were saying that did you go back to the place where you had been working, or did you go somewhere else?
I did end up going back. My number was in the higher range. I think it was number 7 when I had started with that. So I was able to go back to my original facility that I had worked and on my shift. My days off, I mean, granted, you're in the academy, it was 6 to 2, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
I think I went back to Tuesday, Wednesday, 4 to midnight. So it was definitely a little shell shocker back to a change. But I mean, it was good. I had already expected it. I had already kind of worked previously. I knew the ins and outs of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew what to expect going in. A lot of the new guys coming in, like with the holidays and working, it was kind of a little bit change, but it was just a day to day.
Yeah. And so do you primarily sort of just stay at that one facility, or do people bounce around a fair bit? Is there like you can go do overtime somewhere else if you wanted to, or you really just within that realm of your facility?
So with the facility that we had at the time, and granted, it's probably like this really hasn't changed. Is staffing is very minimal. Between retirees and people moving on to greener pastures, staffing's always been a problem, as well as obviously the inmate population increasing.
Mm-hmm.
There's always looking for different units that are opening and different staff opportunities. So with us, there was always either an overtime, but when we were assigned with in the morning assignment that we would get a roll call, we'd be able to see, where we were needed, and pretty much you were just a fill in. You go in as needed, you try it out. If it works and you like it, they could keep you there. But I mean, granted, at the end of the day, it's like they're trying to fill a void and a staffing and try to kind of be bounced around. It was not uncommon to be moved from 3 or 4 different units in a shift based on, this one's going out on a medical trip or such and such, and staffing, you'd be bounced around.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I can imagine, like your one shift could encompass like so many different aspects, especially if you're getting bounced around between units and that kind of thing, like not knowing what to expect, or I mean, in an overall view, what to expect dealing with inmates.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess in a way, talk to us what being a correctional officer is really like, because I think, most people's perceptions would be, Orange is the New Black, or I don't know, The Green Mile, or Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it gets glorified in many ways in that respect. But I think it's one of the sections of law enforcement that everyone kind of knows it exists, but because you guys, do operate within those 4 walls of that facility, like we don't see what you do. We don't have a lot of knowledge about it. Like what is like your day-to-day duties like?
So, I mean, it's funny you bring up obviously the television shows, and there's, people watch Cops or like The Jail, or like you said, Orange is the New Black. People tell us all the time. Is it kind of like that? And I was like, I mean, it's not. No. It's obviously, what you can look at it and be like, wow, these are a little different here. Like, it's definitely different than what you would imagine.
Yeah.
You go into a facility, and the first thing that they say is like, here you are with, hardened criminals or people that are, on their way to, have done serious crimes, and now they're waiting to go to court to answer to those crimes. And, here you are, like, how could you have like this opinion? Like, how could you work with these people, these awful people, this and that? And you have to take your personality and your opinions and set them aside right off the rip when you walk in, because, these are people that have obviously done something wrong and very serious, but there are people that have just made a dumb mistake, and they've done a stupid thing that they may have done and that they instantly regret,
Mm-hmm.
but, based on where it is or the timing of the circumstances, now they kind of have to answer to this stuff. Walking into these places, it's staffing alone, but, the inmate population is very large, and you're working with very dangerous individuals. Mm-hmm. You're definitely outnumbered.
Yeah.
You're working in some units that are 126 to 1, one officer at a time. where if your office is out on relief or one's out on doing other assignment, and you're out in the open. Like,
Yeah.
people think of it, it's like it's a dormitory style setting for some units,
Okay.
as well as, so you're kind of out in the open. You have access to like community restrooms, so there's multiple individuals that are using restrooms and obviously showering aspects. You're out in their day-to-day life. You're watching their life on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
And and if something were to happen, like, you don't have, like I say, like the tools on the tool belt. You really, all you have is your radio and obviously your partner, as well as like your communication skills is what's going to be what you have. We don't carry guns. We don't have, batons
Okay.
or tasers and things like that, like
Nothing.
inside. Like, so people, like, you don't even have this, like, those cell phones based on contraband aspects. So you're really just kind of left with like, oh, this is, the situation that arises itself. You try to de-escalate the best you can by communication. If not, like, you get on the same page with your partner, and you try to have a plan going in, that in the event if there were to something go wrong, like, here's what we're going to try to do. And you hope that the cavalry's close and that your radio's nearby and things like that. The only thing that's going to kind of help you in that point,
Wow. That's pretty crazy to be outnumbered in that way and have no options, like you're saying, literally, except for your communication skills. And I can imagine, like you mentioned to me offline, that you'd done some like crisis negotiation training and all that kind of thing. Like, I can imagine, having to build rapport with the people that you see day in, day out. And like you're saying, you can't really sit in a position of judgment, because that's not going to facilitate you being able to do your job really well.
No. I think going into it is, and everybody can negotiate, everybody can talk. I mean, if you have a family and you have kids, like, let's be honest, everyone's negotiating every day.
Yeah.
If you're telling your child, like, you don't want to eat the cookie, you have to eat your dinner first, and things like that. You come into something like this, is like how you see people on a day-to-day basis. And I tell guys, is how you see me here at work is how you're going to see me when I'm in with my family or on the street. I try not to, like, I don't sway around it. I stick to, obviously, with it. When I'm at work, it's through policy, but I'm a human too. I've made mistakes, and I've kind of, come up to them, and I've admitted to them. And these guys are trying to do their process now with them, and looking at it and taking out, granted, there are guys that have done a lot more serious things, and they're kind of just trying to figure it out. It's, being on the level playing field, like, they have a role, we have a role, and, they're supposed to be compliant and do what they're supposed to do and follow the policy and procedure. And I'm supposed to, obviously, do that, and as well as making sure that I'm doing my rounds and doing my checks and doing my documentation and paperwork as well. Because, the job's changing every day, and there's something new, and you can't become complacent. That's the biggest thing, is just, it's ever changing. And like, you could work the same unit, 5 days in a row, and you're coming in on overtime, and it just could be a completely different job. It's just different people coming in, coming out, being transferred, and it's just overall different every day.
Yeah. And something I did want to ask you about in that respect is, I can imagine that every time you go to work, especially when you're like out on the floor with the inmates, just existing in this state of like hypervigilance, because that is what's going to keep you safe. How is that for you to know that you have to go to work and exist in that state, which is exhausting, like, and probably even more so than like perhaps like a normal police officer who kind of might go from job to job, but then they get to go back to the station and chill out and all that kind of thing. Like, for you, like, you're in that environment for your entire shift, so your vigilance level would be incredibly high. And then in turn, how do you switch it off?
It's fun, because like, you work in these units, you get to know these guys on a basis, and you see when they're having a bad day, whether they maybe come back from court, and you can kind of see it in general. You know the feeling of when walking into the units, and I mean, it's just, like, if it's gonna be a good day or a bad day based on if the unit's quiet or if the unit's very busy, or if there's something going on. And like I said, during the day, it's just, it's like, it's so busy. It's between people coming in, going out, whether it's to programs or educational, programs, or, going to the nurses station, or just in general, that they have, or going to court. Between the back and forth, like, it's always changing. It's always ever changing. And walking into it, like, you got to know, like, obviously, first of all, like, keep the keys, keep the count, and it's kind of where you need to be. And then obviously you're going into cells and stuff like that. And then if something were to happen, in the event, if it was to be a disturbance or an altercation, the individuals are separated, they're brought to medical, then the reports start, then you're brought right back to the unit, and then you're kind of right back involved in it. And then now the adrenaline is now just doing the adrenaline dump, and then you're sitting there like, oh, what's, something else could happen. It's just,
Yeah, it would be full on, I can expect.
yeah.
And so you sort of have mentioned that a lot of the people that you like look after are often kind of like the pre-trial type inmate. So they've been like arrested and incarcerated pending their court case or their court outcome. Is that
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we pretty much house with us is anybody that's pre-trial, which means that has committed a crime that hasn't obviously has been arraigned and is whether held without bail or held with a high bail prior to their charges. And we also house people who have been sentenced for low-level offenses with us, that we're housing them in the meantime prior to them being maybe transferred to another facility and or maybe being appeared with another court case that they may or may not have at that time.
okay?
So yeah, what we have is pretty much a wide range.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be like a very high turnover of like different people kind of coming in and coming out.
It is, and it's also the revolving door. You see, people getting out, and then the same ones coming back, and some are majority of the same cases that they have, but also some are different. Unfortunately, you can go years without seeing the same people, and then you just see them coming like back once in a while. So
yeah, and I bet that's probably like from a humanities point, like probably pretty like depressing to see someone who maybe had that chance to better themselves and then to fall back into that cycle.
yeah, you see these guys all the time. They come in and they're doing the right thing. They're getting their GED, and like with us, we have a lot of therapeutic services, and just in general, the programs that we have to offer are great. They help these guys get jobs and get careers, or even get clean with the substance abuse, which is a big thing right now with us, with our population. But these guys, they get out and like they even get jobs, and then like the biggest thing they say is, "Oh, you'll never see me back. You'll never see me back." And I'm like, I hope not. But I mean, let's be honest, like the statistics unfortunately speak for themselves. And it's one of these things that whether I don't see you soon, like, and then they come in and, they just look like they hit rock bottom again. And it's like, it's tough to watch. It's tough to see. And it's like, all right, well, I mean, you did it before, you got squared away. You guys got to get right back in this routine. And, for a lot of these guys, like, being incarcerated is all they have. It's all they know. And, they come in, they see their friends that they've seen and, and like their family members. We've had people where father and sons are in custody at the same time in different units. It's like, these are the only way, for a lot of these guys that were brought up. So
yeah, it's like what they know sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned the fact that you sort of were working in more of like the housing units and like what you're talking about. And from what you've told me, have you like transitioned to like a somewhat different role now, like in charge of like transporting some of the inmates like to and from court? Is that kind of just something that everyone does?
So yeah, no, I mean, with this point, I mean, now that I'm at the position with transportation, primarily I work with the court system. So pretty much when these guys are leaving for court in the morning, we're transporting them, make sure that they're squared away with their paperwork and stuff. They have their restraints and seatbelts on, obviously, for their safety. And we have their court documentation paperwork, and we're transporting all throughout the state where they may have cases or where they have, court appearances that are being ordered through, as well as people being, with the Massachusetts court system being sectioned on what's called the Section 35, which is going for substance abuse or, alcohol or drug dependency, where right now they go through the court, the family will petition that, and then at that point, after they speak with doctors and lawyers and whatnot, and it's decided that they may be a good fit to get some treatment, and then they get sent pretty much throughout the state. Some people can be sent as way out west, or some people can be sent as way down south, so between that and as well as our female population as well now with, being females or juveniles being transported. It's pretty much just ever evolving, So yeah, I pretty much started that about 8 or 9 years ago. I transitioned from being inside the facility to being outside. And I have been doing that right now.
Okay. And was that like a promotional step for you, or just like to diversify your experience?
So it was a promotional aspect. I mean, how I look at it, it was still kept with the same position, same rank. However, it allowed me the benefit of working now Monday through Friday shifts instead of kind of rotating my days or rotating my shifts. I originally had started, I think Wednesday, Thursday days, with about 9 years in. And then I transitioned to this where I went back to night shift, second shift. but Monday through Friday. So obviously, weekends and holidays being off was unbelievable. It's definitely a change of pace.
Yeah.
For sure, but it wasn't a good thing, being able to be home at night. I remember being home on the weekends and be home during the day to kind of, get the kids to school and stuff like that, which kind of helped. But
Yep.
I sacrificed because then I missed things that happened at night where obviously it was kind of like the balance. But
Yeah.
so you kind of outweigh the pros and cons when doing it. But no, it's been good so far.
No, and I think that's sort of all in all part of our first responder roles is like you're always trying to, give and get in one area and take from another, and it's hard to kind of find that balance sometimes.
They always say go backwards to go forwards, but it's challenging when you're going backwards so many times and then you go forwards, but it might not be the right time to go forwards now. You kind of got to obviously do what's best for the family and try to find the balance for sure.
Yeah, very much so. And sort of talk to me about, you also said that you are part of a like you did your crisis negotiation training, and you're part of some sort of critical incident type of team that like will go and deal with either people who are missing or barricaded people. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So with our academy, we had obviously training with our crisis negotiation as well as communications and whatnot, and as well as CISM team, critical incident stress management. After that, I had tried to apply for different training and different opportunities within my facility or outside, where I was able to be certified as a crisis negotiator, as well as being a part of a peer support and CISM team at the time.
Okay.
I've slowly transitioned away from that, not still doing it as much, but transitioned away from that, as well as now I'm in a critical incident management team role with one of our special operations units who handles a lot of being dispatched throughout the state, or primarily through a couple of different counties where we're attached to do barricaded subjects or hostage negotiation or missing persons, where we're able to do incident management as radio communications and assist with a lot of the other officers on board at that time with K9 or rapid response or snipers and whatnot.
Okay, wow. So is that like within sort of like correctional facilities, or that's kind of basically just like anywhere over the state, any kind of situation that need more resources?
Yeah, it's outside our normal day-to-day functions. In the event if something were to call, we'd be activated. We'd get a call. So obviously go respond, and based on who can and who can't, they devise the teams and they have a meeting point, and they kind of go from there with what it is, what the incident is and what it calls for resources.
Okay. And how often, how frequent is a call out in that respect?
It goes high and low. I've been on for about 5 years on the aspect that I'm in now. I'd say it tends to be busier, during the summer, and in the winter it would slow down. But there's times that where you're getting calls, two in a day, or at least twice a week, and you're wrapping up one, and then there's maybe a call coming in for something else, and based on what the call and the resources are needed, you're literally just bouncing one from another. Wow. I mean, it seems to be pretty frequent during the the warmer months and stuff like that. During even large scale events that maybe there's pre-planning on, they came to be pretty activated pretty frequently.
Yeah, I don't think anyone wants to be outside in New England during the winter months.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely not fun for sure. Sitting out in the cold, yeah.
Exactly. And so if I can, I wanted to sort of pivot to like the mental health aspects of being in law enforcement and a correctional officer. So obviously we did just touch on the fact that you had involvement in CISM and peer support and all that kind of thing. But what I wanted to ask you before we sort of get to that is, what was sort of either mentioned or brought up, or was there any kind of training when you went through the academy in regards to like managing your own mental health, dealing with the kind of things that you would deal with at work?
It's funny. I mean, yes and no. I mean, you think about this line of work. There's a reason why you're going into it. And it's primarily to help people, whether it's police, fire, EMS, or us. It's spoken that you do this line of work because at the time it was, the pay is good, or there's benefits attached to it, and you're trying to provide for your family. I mean, that's kind of why you take this job. I mean, if anybody says like they want to be a corrections officer, you'd be like, well, why do you want to do that? You want to work with inside with that many people, and give up your holidays and your days off and like not be around. It's like, it's crazy. But I mean, you have this sense of wanting to help and wanting to assist others when that time comes.
Mm-hmm.
And, working with your brother officers and sister officers, like you realize it is a sense of community and a family that, with where you are with somebody, and when someone's having a bad day, like I'll work with people, and or even me, and I come in and like you can tell I've worked with this guy for so long, and then today he's on an off day, like something's kind of going on. And you know, our academy would teach us like being able to communicate, like talk, express yourself. And again, that's kind of how, a lot of us were raised. Like if you have something on your mind, try to, express it, talk about it. But we also kind of push things aside, and we bottle it. And if something were to happen, we're just like, yep, I just want to deal with it. I want to, get through the reports. I'm going into my weekend, or I'm trying to, how many times that something has happened when you're 10 minutes before shift ends and you're going on vacation and you're like, oh, now I'm stuck here.
Every
Writing
time.
reports
Every
and,
time.
injuries. It's always happens. And you're like, you cringe, but like, it's true. It happens all the time. You're like, well, what do we do here? And then, when instances come up or it's extremely stressful at times, you just try to, you speak to the guy with you next to you, and you kind of get on the same page. And like, you realize like, you just went through like an oh shit moment, but like, here you are now, like we're trying to like dissect it. Some people don't want to talk about it. Some people do. But at the end of the day, like everyone handles it their own way. The stress that comes with the job, and a lot of it pushes us in our academy to push us to the stress point and the breaking point to see how well you handle under pressure.
Yeah.
And it's good because then you can kind of get to see to know like, all right, well, this is, and you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be things that you're going to happen that you're going to be like, oh, the Monday morning quarterback, I should have done this, but it's not like it's not going to happen again. But you take the skills from what it is. Like I say it all the time, like I admit to it. If there's something that I did that wasn't maybe the right thing, I make amends from it and I move on, because it's going to happen again. But at least you make the mistake and you admit it and you just try to learn from it. I mean, when it comes to like, feelings and emotions, like it's a lot kind of going on when the situation arises itself that you're just trying to like, all right, well, what do we need to do? Like step one is we need to, if it's a fight, we need to separate. Step two is make sure we get medical. Step three is make sure we're okay. And, we kind of go from there, and then obviously close off the area and secure it, and then go from there. But it's always ever changing with, at the end of the day, we go in to try to go home safe. And that's always the paramount,
No, very much so. And I think as well, like you're saying, they sort of test you a little bit in the academy, because I think that is important, because if you don't know how either you or your partner is going to react under pressure and under stress, and the reality is not everyone reacts well under pressure.
No.
And look, I mean, and you know what? 9 times out of 10, you can react like freaking awesome. And then there can be 1 time out of 10 where you freeze, or you have, like you said, you're having an off day, and it's unpredictable in that sense. But like when you're talking about how outnumbered you are in regards to the inmates and you guys, and you don't have any resources, like you're saying, except for your communication skills and your radio, like everyone's got to be on their game, like every time they're there.
It's funny, like I started at a young age, and like I looking into it, like the senior guys, they brought you on, they kind of taught you the way, and like by looking at them and showing them, you could see like something's going to go on. The way they would start to position themselves or get their things squared away, like they'd have their handcuffs out, or they'd get their keys, like get their radio, and you knew something was either about to happen or was ready to happen. And learning from them, it's like, coming in at 1 year, I think you don't really know a lot. You're kind of just trying to get your feet wet. But then you say you spoke to somebody at 5 years or at 10 years. They all have this gauge of like, they've learned the job, they know the job, and they know the players at that point. They know when something's about to go off. They're like, all right, well, this guy's having a bad day, I'm going to keep an eye on him, or this thing's about to happen because this guy just did this behind the scenes. Or at the end of the day, like I think we do a pretty good job with the inmate population that we have to officers. I think I feel like we do a very good job with, de-escalating and talking, like the respect aspect is mutual.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like we all have a job to do. And I think we do very well in that regards with our administration staff. Pretty much shows that we do, when it comes down to it, like we try not to go out of our way. And I think, like I said to you before, is how you see the officers is how you're going to see them out on the street, more or less. Like being vigilant, obviously, and understanding the surroundings based with their family, but we don't try to, I guess, we don't bust balls. We try not to. We try to kind of just go with the flow, but understanding like it is what it is when something were to happen. Yeah. And I think by being a senior officer, you can kind of see where it comes out to, where it benefits you, I should say.
Yeah, and I think that's true. Like, I feel like having an antagonistic relationship with people in that position, it's not like there's no worthwhile benefit that either of you are going to get out of it. Like, So I don't know if it's sort of the same here when like, so a lot of, like when I worked back home in Australia, if there is a court that people will get brought to, like a magistrate's court, a police station will be attached to it. And then that police station will have cells. So you don't have inmates in for like extended periods of time. It was kind of more like that holding pattern type of place for, you know, a week or two sort of at most. But, you know, there's that old adage of like, you know, what is it? You get more flies with honey than vinegar sort of thing. Like,
Is that what you do with vinegar?
yeah. And I think I was like remembering it with a couple of girlfriends that I used to work with, and it was, yeah, like you not so much like build a rapport, but there has to be a little bit of level of mutual respect. And even though there is a power imbalance because they're in custody and you are not, and you're in charge of them, but you know, I think having that adversarial relationship, like, you know, and that is where that judgment comes into it too. You're like, oh, well, that prick's in for murder or rape or this or that. Like your side of humanity is going to balk at that, and you are going to have judgments and opinions about it, but you have to hold that inside and just be like, yep, no worries, mate, like, let's do this, let's do that, da 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 da. And then it just keeps it all nice and calm, because that's what you want.
Yeah. It's funny because like you look at the grand scheme of things, like you said, we have a job to do, they're there for something, but like, you know them, and whether the case may be, it's just like, well, listen, here's what I need, here's the end game, I need you here, but you're having a bad day and you're here. Like, what can we do to get you to here? You know, sticking with, you know, rules and regulations, but like looking at, you're a person, I get it, but like, this is what I need to do. And at the end of the day, if you break it down very simply, like having a conversation, like that's half the battle.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys, like, you know, they want to put on a show, or they want to fight for, you know, to have everybody look at me, as we call like the cell warriors. But like having a conversation with them, half the battle. You're just looking at them and you're like, really? Like, is this what we're going to do? Yeah. And they're like, well, you know, I'm upset about this, or I'm upset. I'm like, all right, I get it, but like, that's not affecting me. Like, I tell this guy all the time, like, you know, I'm just your Uber driver. I'm just the guy driving you to court this day. Like, but you don't want to go, and you want to resist, and you don't want to, you know, I get it, but like, that's all I'm supposed to do is just get you there. I can't handle the courts. I don't have any power or leeway. My job is just to get you there. And at that point, it's like, you know, what do you want to do? Like, you want to fight with me all day? That's fine. Like, I get it. And then they're like, all right, well, and then they understand, like, they get it, but, you know, they just want to vent. They want to voice their concern, and they just want to feel heard.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, all right, we got over it. All right, now we can kind of move about our day. Yeah. You know?
No, and that makes total sense. And I think, so we used to have to feed them as well in the cells and everything like that. And then if there was a little bit of argy-bargy going on, you just find like the oldest crook, like the real, you know, bloke who's been in and out, like institutionalized like his whole life, and you'd be like, oi mate, like, get that knucklehead under control for me, sort of thing, and be like, no worries, miss. And you know, he gets a couple of extra biscuits with the hot chocolate at bedtime, and you're like, hey, happy days.
You definitely know the senior guy in the unit that's like, all right, you know what, I'll talk to him and this and that. And, you know, if they're constantly coming to the, you know, they need phone calls, or they need the library services, or they need paperwork, right? We handle all that. But it's like the same guy coming to the bubble 5 or 6 times, or the officer station. And like the other inmates are like, why is this guy going to the station so many times? And it's like, guy, you know, rest your neck. Like, go, take a break, come back in about an hour. Like, it is what it is. Like, I'm here all day. Yeah. You know, it's one of those things. And the biggest thing is too, is like with police departments is, you know, they arrest the individual, or, you know, they summons them, but if they arrest him and then they're in custody, they'll drop him off to the court the next day, or they'll drop him off at other facilities, or, you know, central lockups. And then it's up to the officers at that point, who then take control of them and then have them on day to day out. Like, pretty much officers, book them in and process them. They're pretty much hands off. It's then on to, I would say, like either the sheriff's departments or the Department of Corrections and stuff like that would then take responsibility of that and then have them on a day-to-day basis. Yep. So for the amount of time that police officers are with an individual, it's minimal, obviously. But then you look at the other side of it, then they're here for the rest of it. And then we'd have to deal with them on a day in a day out basis, sometimes 16 hours a day. Yeah, and it's a lot. It's tough working in the same unit 16 hours a day, or 8 hours, and you've had a guy that's just kind of been on you. And then, oh, by the way, you're going to be forced. Now you're working another shift, 8 hours. And you're like, I'm out here in 10 minutes. And what do you mean? Like, nope, you got to rework. We need you. Wow. It's staffing. So you're like, ugh. And then you're doing 16 hours with the guy, and you're like, ugh. So it tends to be pretty challenging. So you can be
mandated to work overtime?
Yeah. Yep. There's times with with staffing based on, I'm assuming with whatever units need staffing levels, that they could say, we're going to need, 10 guys tonight. And based on volunteers, if they just got hit the night before, they're not going to be volunteering again. Or if they know they're going to get hit the following night, they're not volunteering. They could run a shift, 10 to 15 guys into overtime and being forced. And
Yeah.
there's been times where one of your shifts is another shift that was held over.
Oof.
Especially that midnight shift.
Yeah.
It's the whole 3 to 11 or 4 to midnight shift that they're all sitting there. And then you end up seeing them all the next day. And obviously, between 8 hours sleep or such and such, if they're trying to do things at home and get ready for kids and stuff at school, they're definitely coming in pretty exhausted working in the next day. And then they do swaps to help yourself to get time off. If time off's denied PTO, they try to do swaps with another officer to help you so you can try to, maybe get a piece of the weekend or try to have something that you're trying to make plans ahead of time. But it's tough when you do a swap. You work 16 hours, and then the next night you're about to leave. They hit you again for 16 hours, and then you go into your days off. You're like, your first day is garbage. Yeah. You're trying to just catch up on sleep and go through the motions. Yeah. And next thing you know, you got 2 more days left before you kind of go back there, and it ruins your whole plan.
And how does that affect like morale of the people at the institution?
It's tough because you look at it being, no one wants to be held. It's being and this is where I look at it like, we're prisoners on our own way too, because if we're being held into a facility that we want to leave, we can't. And, someone that does 20 years is held just as much time as a guy doing, say, I think like a 10-year sentence, by doing 40, 60 hours a week. It's tough because then you come in, you're exhausted, you're not on your A game. And then if something were to happen, you're just kind of like, ugh. And if it's happening more and more frequently, and it's depending on which shift you are, it's a lot, it's hard working a 3 to 11 and then an 11 to 7 shift, getting out at 7 in the morning and knowing you're back at 3,
Yeah, very much so. And I don't know, obviously, like what the facilities are like that you work in, but I remember like the cells that we worked in, like the word that I would, and I mean, obviously it's a jail, like people are locked up, but even when you're working there, it's like there's not a lot of windows. Everything just feels very claustrophobic. And we spoke about it offline, but cells and jails and interview rooms, they have a real smell. Like there is a pungent, lingering smell that I think is only identifiable to a crook or to an inmate or something like that. So I feel like, they're getting mandated to work overtime when you're just like, I need fresh air, I need sunlight, I need like something to like.
You need, not fluorescent lights or like, recirculated air in a unit. I mean, sometimes like you go out into like to one of the prison yards and you're doing recreation or watching rec, and the heat in the bricks would start, probably in like June, and it wouldn't leave till October. It would be so hot. There's no central air in a majority of the units, that we have. And if you're out in the yard or out and just walking around in the cafeteria, it's stagnant air. Yeah. And it's, like I said, some have windows, some don't, but you're looking at it like you're claustrophobic, to say the least. It's just the smell. And then let's add 100 guys that are about to eat, and hygiene's huge, but I mean, you think about it, as a lot of these guys aren't really pressed on hygiene, and they're going in and, you can obviously tell if it's on a hot July day, and then here you are with, an overpopulated chow hall, you can kind of get to see what it smells like. And it's interesting. Yeah.
I think I sort of would remember it, like, and it is very vivid. Like, a lot of the time people talk about like trauma and how it's sights and smells and noises and stuff like that really will kind of just draw you back to it. And it's like this weird, like stale sweat, like stale perspiration and like stinky feet. I think that's like the best way that I can describe it.
It's like, definitely that. Yeah.
So gross. And so you were also saying that like the staffing levels are sort of, relatively low at times, which is obviously why you have to get like mandated. But is there a push to be getting more staff, or is it just there's more need for inmates, and then like it raises the level, like, or it offsets the levels and the ratios, like?
Yeah, it's kind of like a perfect storm. I mean, if you think about what, a lot of the, with this state in Massachusetts being it's a lot about rehabilitation and programs and like, services and, college education courses. And we offer, with us, we have a substance abuse program, or what's it called? medication assisted treatment program that we have. Like, we run a lot of different types of programs, and because of that and things that are opening, it requires more staff and more staff, as well as, then if you think about staff being, for time off, and then now staff with all these other programs, and then you can't anticipate that if there's an outside medical trip or a disturbance or, court trips, that you're going to run into staffing levels at that. But just in general, you have people retiring. I would say, like, knowing what I am now, like, starting this job now is completely different than when I started, 18 years ago, just about. It's a lot more. Back then it was like, keep the keys, keep the count, keep the job, as a guy at old time would say to me. But now it's, you got to make sure you with documentation, and it's sure it's everything with fire departments or police officers, or everything's documentation. That's going to be your biggest friend. And, whether it's body cameras being introduced, as well as, having more staff come. But with people, these changes, a lot of the old timers don't want it. They're at the end. They don't want to deal with it. And they're leaving. Yeah. And you know what? You don't blame them. The jobs change. It's like, the guy that's about to retire from baseball, they've had enough. Like, the numbers are where they're at, and, they kind of realize that there's nothing they can do. But with people retiring and people just moving on for greener pastures, and I'm not saying that there's, the grass is greener, because I've heard both sides of it saying it is or it isn't. But you try to look at where you are today and where you want to be. If you want to leave at 20, you should have the opportunity to, but you obviously want to make sure that you're doing things right, whether it's taking a part of additional training programs or anything to do to better yourself within that time frame, whether the department offers it or whether you're doing it on your own, to build your resume. So maybe at 20 years, if you think about it, you retire with us, it's 50%, of our annual salary. Then you're only trying to make up 50% of it doing, at that point it's $22 an hour, $25 an hour, which you can easily try to make up the slack. And you have more of a sense of, like, a purpose, and you can kind of make your own hours, and you don't have to start at the bottom. But the grass is greener outside, but you try to do what's best while the time that you here. That's 8 hours a day. Come in with a positive attitude and try to leave with a positive attitude. The job isn't hard per se. It's harder, dealing with the ever changing of the documentation or the policies or the administration, which is, it's part of it. When people say, like, it's the politics. Well, I mean, it's always a big thing. You can say, people getting, passed over, or, different promotion opportunities or advancement opportunities. It's, when the time is right, it's what it is. But if it doesn't, then you still need to kind of better yourself. You can't become stagnant. You can't become negative. And I say to guys all the time, and I've been passed over numerous times, and it's sitting here, it's like, well, why? Well, it wasn't the right time, or it was, based on, human resources aspect or employee recommendations. They find the better fit. But you look at it like, can you go and be negative about it? That's the easiest thing. You can just be negative and roll with it, and then you be that guy, or you can remember, it is what it is. The guy got the better position, or the girl, and you roll with it, and there's the next one coming along. And you try to always look at the next one, because at the very least, I look at it, and I look at it because it helps me, is I'm raising a daughter, and looking at it, like, she needs to know that at the end of the day, like, if you try for something and you work hard and you don't get it, you got to be able to kind of understand, like, maybe it's just not your time.
Roll with the
punches. For the next, it just gives you more time to train, more time to prepare, and kind of to better yourself as a person and as an employee here, because they're trying to obviously invest money and time into you. Maybe they want to see how you react to that position being either declined or not accepted, and it kind of goes from there. And hopefully, it works out. I like to say that now, and I'm 18 years in, but there's times I've looked at it like, you get discouraged. Absolutely. Like, I come home here and I'm like, I don't understand, like, what I could be doing better, but I always try to get feedback and criticism, say, what do I need to do? Where do I need to be? What can I be doing to better myself? And, you try to take it with a grain of salt. I'm not saying I'm the best employee, but I don't feel like I'm the worst employee. I think I try to look at it and say, I know it's bad, but I try to say, like, realistic. At the end of the day, it's like, I try to, like, look at, like, grain of salt. I try to do the right thing, and I always try to, admit when I'm wrong. But at the end of the day, like, I try to just take it for what it is. It's a job. It's 8 hours. You try not to take it home, which can be difficult in itself, especially when you're dealing with, things that happen on the job or even outside of the job, but you're home and it's still something job related.
Of course.
But it's just one day at a time. That's kind of what it is. I try not to anticipate tomorrow's, like, worries and bothersome. I try to be present in today, I guess.
No, that makes total sense. And I think you're saying, I think every large department, there's politics. There's politics at play. There's, like, some form of nepotism. There's, like, all that shit goes on everywhere. So, like you're saying, if you kind of go, like, one of the things that I look to, or one of the sayings I like to say is, like, swings and roundabouts. So it's, always like
like that.
sometimes it's your turn, sometimes it's someone else's. And, it's even like someone
Yep.
like buying you a drink or buying you a coffee and they're like, oh, I want to pay you back. It's like, nah, mate, swings and roundabouts, all good. Like, you'll get me next time. So
Exactly.
I think
Yep. You always catch it on the go around for
exactly.
sure.
And so with sort of everything that you've like talked to me about today in regards to, like the stresses and the hypervigilance and all that kind of thing, like I guess, and sort of to your knowledge, because it it might not be something that you're overly aware of, but like is like depression and suicide rates, are they like prevalent amongst the correctional population?
Yeah, they are. There's been a lot of statistics and surveys done that it's probably it's the highest rate of divorce in any profession.
Right.
It's substance abuse and in general suicide is at the highest. I think, especially in this state, there was a survey done a couple of years ago about was it 45 officers in a 30-year period have committed suicide in general in the state of Massachusetts. Something about it's the fourth highest in general of any profession going. Suicide tends to run pretty high with corrections officers based
Mm.
on a lot of the stresses that it carries, and obviously trying to find between leaving work at work or home at home, and substance abuse or divorce. It tends to be a lot based on the experiences that you witness through a regular career, whether you start at 1 year or 5, it doesn't really matter. What you witness and what you see on a day-to-day basis affects everybody differently.
Yeah, of course.
I think our place does a pretty good job with services and staffing to help people and maybe recognize it. And there's training that's offered as well. But I mean, it's like everything else. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to talk about it. We bottle it down. And I remember starting my background investigation prior to being hired. They investigate us to make sure that we're vetted. And my investigator said the best advice. He goes, the best advice I can give you here is keep your friends, because your friends you'll lose throughout the time, and they won't get your job.
Mm.
They don't understand why you're not at barbecues on 4th of July weekend or at Christmas with your family. Like you'll be like, oh, that's a tough job, but you're getting paid to do it. It's okay. Or
You
oh,
chose
yeah,
it.
someone spit at me today. Yeah, like you chose it. But it happens. You got someone threw urine at you today or threw shit covered it on a wall, and you're like, someone spit at you, and you're like, oh, but that's what you get paid to do. You get paid to deal with it. No, you don't.
No.
You get paid to keep them safe and care, custody, and control. But it's not what you signed up for, to have piss and shit thrown all over your uniform or blood from cutting up and suicide and looking at all these things. Then you take them home and then no, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna have dinner with my family and just a regular day. Like, oh, how was your day? Day was good, but you don't want to really say, well, this is what it kind of would transpire today. Like, Jesus, So you bottle it down and put it aside, and you think of if something were to happen, if there's a hiccup at work, or someone unfortunately maybe has discipline measures, and then now they've added that on to their job, and then they go home and they try to get back into like a mom and dad routine with kids and parenting, or just in general having a social life. People look at you like, the stories that you share, the outside people are like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not normal, like what goes on a day-to-day basis. And then you go, well, I'm going to go out and hang out with maybe more coworkers who understand me on a day-to-day basis. And that's what I was going back to, like my background investigator says, keep your friends that you have, and whether they do a different job altogether, they don't ever understand your job, you'll never understand theirs, but being able to at least communicate with them, they can understand and have a different perspective. Because of course you go out with, if a guy walks with a limp and you work with him every day, you're going to have a limp too. You work with the same guys who have the same problems and see the same things on a day-to-day basis, you're going to relate more to them than outside in the public. So then, like, you think you have a sense of knowledge, like, hey, we're on the same page. Like they witness that too, and then we just stress on our own and our own personal lives. But then, like, you bring it home, and then it's constantly revisiting the experience of the traumatic situations or incidents that you arise, and it never ends. It's just, and then you kind of push it aside. And then the help that we have now is a lot different than maybe where we were back then. But no one wanted help. No one wanted to get the help that they need, or go speak to somebody professionally about it. But if you're going to do a job in this career, and regrets any career, whether it's firefighters or police officers, I mean, EMTs, nurses, doctors, like there's times that something happens, the oh shit moment, or something tragic that you've witnessed that you've been involved with or a part of, that you don't want to deal with it, but you have to be able to kind of talk about it with someone, and having someone that's had that experience that was able to talk about it and maybe better themselves and express themselves and show like it's okay to feel this way, and you have to understand that it's part of the process. But looking at it like, you don't have to stay that way. You can get the help and speak about it and, de-escalate, de-stress, or debrief, and move on from it. And you can still circle back to it if you have these feelings of, that you have, or emotions, but being able that it's okay. And you're not the only one. I mean, they write plenty of books about, officer wellness and stress seminars and crisis management that you have for officers and staff. But looking at it on a day-to-day basis, you just don't know. It's tough. Everyone handles it different, but you have to at least ask for help and see other people get it as the biggest thing.
Yeah. No, and I think you're right. Like, I think there's finding or striking the right balance between having friends that are either in the job or like that similar role, and having civilian friends, because like you're saying, like they have these different viewpoints and they do see the world differently, but you don't necessarily have to see it the same way to be able to get comfort from that person, and be able to go and not talk shop with them. Just go and have like normal conversations. Like sometimes that's really beneficial. And as well, like you're saying, it's I think everyone also starts on a different level and on a different step. So something that, might not bother you in the slightest will bother someone because they've also had like 10 things from their childhood or previous experiences and all that kind of thing. So with everyone's level of trauma and life experience is so varied, like it's really challenging, I think, for people to compare each other, to go, oh, well, it didn't bother that guy, so why is it bothering me? And then they can spiral from there.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if someone, like you said, has a history or something like that, and an incident happens that, like, you think, like, oh, come on, like, figure it out, let's go, like, but like, you're right, you don't know. And a lot of our, with us is like, we are a family to an extent. We all know each other, our personal lives, our family. But then you look at like, maybe we don't really know what goes on behind the scenes, or something that maybe that they've put down deep down that we don't know. And then something happens, and then it's bring up like, why is this person responding to this way like this? And then, we might not know.
Yeah.
And looking at it, it's like, well, unless, at that point, then they understand, and then maybe they express themselves as to why. It's like, okay, like, you get it. Like, you could work with someone for 5 days a week, like I said, and be completely fine. And maybe one day they've had a bad day, something going on, maybe at home or such and such. And then they come into work. Like, I joke around with this guy every day. No, today he's not. Like, what's kind of going on? Like, hey, you all right? Check in with yourself.
Yeah. Exactly. And so you obviously seem sort of very astute and aware of like all of the things that kind of come into play. Is that sort of what like prompted you, like your interest in regards to that, and looking after your colleagues and your troops to want to either join up like or do the CISM course or join up peer support, or like where did that sort of impetus come from for you?
I think, early on being with the profession that we are is, being able to assist and not knowing what it was at the time. Like, you think somebody's had a bad day, you're be able to go talk to them. And I mean, I do that anyway. I do that on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. Being a part of a CISM team or peer support, it helps, obviously, because you're able to have that additional training, as well as, kind of catching the clues of kind of what's been kind of going on and catching the signs, I guess. But with us personally, it was me coming out of the academy and having additional training to see that, to maybe better myself or better other officers, handling the stresses that come with the job. And having, individuals in our academy who, had passed away throughout the, after the academy, and understand, like, this is a close bond you shared with someone for so long. And, unfortunately now they're not there, and it's, it hits home. Like, things unfortunately do happen, outside of the office per se. And it's tough. And then you come home to your family, like, why? You ask questions, why? And that's the biggest, no one has those answers, unfortunately, and you look at, the family who's obviously now dealing with this loss or tragedy, and you wonder, like, could you have done something different? And looking at that is like, you can't save everybody, but you can try to at least save one, and then that person sees, and hopefully it kind of builds from there. And when things like this happen, then everyone bands together and tries to work together to come up with different strategies and programs and conferences. But it takes something unfortunate to happen for that to kind of bring out the positive at that point. But if we can kind of bring it back to the programs and the services that are there ahead of time, and kind of periodically check in and say, like, hey, what can we try to do to better ourselves? And whether we have check-ins with each other or check-ins with like administration, just even like, hey, I see that you're off today. What's been kind of going on? I don't want to, check in with you. What it is? Well, we got to get this going on at home. Okay, well, let's, what can we try to do to accommodate that? Whether it's different hours or maybe different shift for a certain period of time. And I think like they do pretty well with that now, but I think it always wasn't like that.
Yeah.
So I think we're taking steps in the right direction, and then looking at it as well as like anybody can help out somebody, just lending an ear. Like, hey, I'm here if you need me. Call me anytime. It is what it is. And if the phone rings, which it's have, like, you understand, like they're in a bad spot, they're in a bad place, and maybe they have no one to turn to. And if they're turning to you, you're there to help them, because you know what? If the shoe was on the other foot, that person would pick up. That person would be there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you said it sort of wasn't always that way. Like, in what sort of time frame do you really think that you've seen like the change occur?
I'd say over the last probably 10 years or so, I've seen the change in general. Unfortunately, there's, suicide does run pretty high with correctional officer staff. And you see something tragic happen, and it kind of puts things in perspective that you wish you could have tried to help out. And they've done statistics on it with everything else, and then you add a component of like substance abuse, like you see the signs. And I think a lot of people do, but they're afraid to say something, or you think, John Smith, he's been great, he's fine, no big deal, and you're like, no, I think I want to, no, he's fine, leave him alone. They're like, okay, cool. But then like, that that person might be in a bad spot, and just by you asking, I think it helps. And by having a lot of offices kind of checking in with each other, doing like the daily check-in, it shows that we are kind of a family. Sometimes we might not get along, and we might not, we kind of hate each other at times, but you look at it like we do try to help each other out. No one wants to see someone, down and out on the, and I think the department recognizes that. I think, having an officer who's able to do the job right, and yeah, might be have something going on, we're able to kind of intervene a little bit and assist him to have him be a better employee. Where the flip side is, unfortunately, something might happen that, maybe you feel responsible or you feel like you could have done more. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now with transitioning with, programs to help staff and training that we were offered, as well as, I think I can say like administration has an open door policy where they can kind of, some of them where you're able to talk to them, set up an appointment and speak to them if something's going to go on. But like they have a handle of their employees, and this, it's not always easy, and I'm sure they have a job to do too. But looking at it, like they're here to help the best staff to do their job, because then it makes them look good. It's kind of like a big circle in retrospect all around.
Yeah, no, that sounds really, really good and really positive. And so if someone sort of did reach a stage where they're like, fuck, I'm not okay, like I need some help, is that because of that sort of open door policy and stuff, is that process like fairly streamlined? Like, is there some sort of like EAP system that you guys have that you can access to be able to get some like mental health assistance?
Yeah, we have several. The unit that we particularly have is several offices that are specifically trained in obviously peer support and employee assistance, that we're able to obviously contact. Some are on different shifts, so you can always kind of get somebody, whether it's different shifts, different days off, and you're able to speak to them. And at that point, it's obviously confidential. That person would then bring it to another person within the unit, probably a director or administrator at that point, who then would be able to reach out personally in contact with them and kind of see what kind of services they need, or where they're struggling, or where they need assistance with. And then from there, they obviously reach out to the therapeutic services or substance abuse areas, or just in general, maybe to reach out to somebody just to sit down and have a cup of coffee with. It's like, hey, like, we're all dealing with it. We're all kind of in the thick of it. Like, what can we do to help you?
Yeah.
Is it something that we can try to do? Or if we can't, like, we'll try to get you the help that we can. You take the phone call, you just answer the phone call. Some people just want to be able to listen and be heard.
Yeah.
It's half the battle.
Yeah, very much so. And I think to have someone listen and feel like that person just understands and acknowledges and validates. And yeah, sometimes it's like I don't need anyone to fix anything for me. I just need to be able to offload.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Well, it's good that, seems to be working somewhat in the place where you're situated at the moment, which, is a positive sign, because I think it seems like everyone in the first responder realm is sort of still just kind of playing catch up when it's a known issue. Like depression and suicide and trauma, it's so evident in our profession. So to hear that, one place is somewhat getting it right. It's a good thing.
Yeah, we're definitely trying for sure. I'm sure we could do a lot, more and improve, but I think just it's taking the first
Yeah.
steps. Let's just try to understanding that there is an issue and a problem that it's kind of going on, and understanding that we're here to try to get the job done. In order to do that, we need to have guys, women, girls working together and being in line, and obviously being the best versions of themselves.
Yeah.
So it's not just while they're at work; it's when they go home to their families. They're not, getting the rundown version that someone doesn't want to talk about anything, do anything, and just kind of is someone that's there but not actually there. They're present, but they're not kind of like thousand yard stare. They're just not in the right. Yeah. So
yeah, no, that makes sense. And so I think we've sort of covered almost everything, Dave. That's been really wonderful.
Right.
Thank you for coming and having a chat. I normally finish these podcast episodes with asking the guest 2 questions. And obviously the name of the podcast is I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. And it's in reference to the darkness and those elements of humanity that we all kind of see that not necessarily everyone knows exists out there, but we get a front row seat to at times. And so the first question is, what do you do to hold space for your darkness in that respect?
When things kind of, put you back against the wall and you kind of, challenge, you're overwhelmed, and I try to like just slow it down. And by slowing it down, looking at what drives me every day to do what I do and to kind of keep me grounded. And it's family, it's being able to come home and show that, I'm having struggles or I'm having difficulty with something, but having, my family not necessarily witness it, but to see that I am able to address it and kind of overcome it and work it out. And whether it's, it's exercising or, being with my family and just being present and understanding that, it's a career that everyone has, but it's work, but it's not what defines you. I mean, you can do, I say the time, the only thing that you could do 20 years. And at the end of the day, who's going to remember you work late is your kids. Yeah. And then looking at it, it's like just trying to find that balance and doing like, the checks and balances with yourself, whether it's where you are as being a father or, being with your relationship, your health and your career, even with your friendships, just trying to find that balance of being even keeled altogether. And I'm not saying it works all the time. I'm saying I just try to find it the best I can and try to do the check-ins with myself to kind of, for the people that depend on me. And I'm trying to help them be the best version of myself in this process, in this journey.
No, that sounds excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And the second question is, what can someone do, whether it is a friend, a partner, a spouse, anything like that, to support you in being able to hold space for that darkness?
I think anybody that you're able to kind of reach out with, whether it's your coworkers or someone that maybe has work that's, retired, I think having them see you in a different light, they know that they're able to assist you or help you, and maybe they can kind of help you as well. But you got to be the call. You got to be the one to ask for them to help, and you're going to answer that call for them, knowing that, like you said, they might not need anything from you. They just need someone to listen. Mm-hmm. But being present for them is like the biggest thing that can kind of help going forward.
Yep. No, that makes total sense. All right. Thank you for coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience in your law enforcement role and your corrections experience, because I think it's been really worthwhile. And like I said, it's an element of law enforcement that, besides the glorified movies and TV shows, like not a lot of people hear about. So I really appreciate you taking the time today, Dave, to come and share all of that with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Cheers. All right. This has been another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I've been your host, Erin Jane. And as always, let me listen in a way you've never been heard. Cheers.